Greetings, fellow humans, and welcome to the Renaissance Yorkshireman podcast. Today, I'd like to talk to you about an introduction to lucid dreaming, part 2. So, I'm going to do this in 4 parts. The first part, I'm going to talk about cultural attitudes to dreams. The second part, I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences between liminal dreaming and lucid dreaming. The third part, I'm going to talk a little bit about dream recall. And the fourth part, I'm going to talk about some of my experiences of analysing dream signs in my dreams when I first started to develop a lucid dreaming practice about 12 years ago. The first assumption I'm going to make is that you have watched my first video on lucid dreaming, and if you haven't, go and watch that first. And the second assumption that I'm going to make is that you may well have kept a lucid dreaming diary for a month and perhaps written down at least a dozen dreams, and perhaps you have underlined the dream signs that you have seen in your dreams and made a list of different dream signs. Because this is what you need to work with at the beginning if you're going to develop a lucid dreaming practice. As a Westerner, the first thing to note about cultural attitudes to lucid dreaming is that dreams are not highly valued in Western culture. Now, if we compare Western culture to, say, Indigenous Americans or many parts of Africa or certain parts of Asia where dreams are valued, they are not generally seen as a big deal for most Westerners. We have expressions like, it was just a dream, or he's a daydreamer, or was it real, or was it a dream? The fact of the matter is, the dream state has a reality of its own. Now, that reality is different from the waking state, but it is a type of reality nonetheless. You can't just dismiss this as nonsense. And if you do, you're losing a lot of what it is to really be a human, because most of us spend at least a third of our lives sleeping, and for much of that time while we're asleep, we are dreaming. So if you're an adult in your 30s, you've probably spent several years dreaming. And to reject this as unimportant is, in my view, a massive mistake. In the Western tradition, we really need to look to Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung and what they wrote about dreams, and the collective unconscious and the personal unconscious. So there's different ways of understanding dreams. Sometimes in dreams, it's your brain working through things that happen during the day. So for example, perhaps your car broke down during the day. Later that night, you dream about your car breaking down. This is simply your brain working through stuff that happened during your waking life, and often this doesn't really have much meaning. However, often your subconscious is trying to communicate with your conscious mind. And the thing that we have to bear in mind when the subconscious is trying to communicate with us is the language of the subconscious is symbolism. Symbols and metaphor. It is extremely rare, if it happens at all, that the unconscious mind communicates in a literal manner with us. The meaning of symbols can often be very difficult to interpret because people have personal meanings and also there are cultural meanings. If, like me, you're a Westerner and come from a predominantly Christian/atheist society, a cross, for example, has a particular meaning. But if you're an atheist rather than a Christian, it may have quite a different meaning altogether, and that would be a personal interpretation. But often, the symbolism of our dream comes from our culture, not from our own experience. But not always. So often you could perhaps, if you were trying to interpret your dreams, you could perhaps come up with 5, 6 or 7 different interpretations of any symbol, which is why it can be very difficult to interpret dreams. But never forget, the language of dreams is symbolism. Lucid dreaming and liminal dreaming. These are 2 completely different dreaming states. Liminal dreaming occurs when you're just going into sleep and when you're just coming out of sleep. So you were conscious, you're becoming unconscious. You were unconscious, you're becoming conscious. And the first thing to note about liminal dreaming is it occurs during non-REM sleep. Now, I'm not going to talk about liminal dreaming today. I'll talk about it in a different video. In contrast to liminal dreaming, lucid dreaming almost always, there can be some exceptions on occasion, but as a general rule, lucid dreaming occurs during REM sleep. And the first thing to note about REM sleep is it tends to occur more and for longer towards the end of the sleep cycle. So if we assume that you're going to sleep for 8 hours, you will have more dreams during the last 2 hours of sleep than you will during the first 6 hours of sleep. And that means if you're trying to develop a lucid dreaming practice and you're regularly only sleeping for 6 or 7 hours all night or less, it will be much harder than if you're sleeping for 8 hours. There is also a strategy that can take advantage of this, which is called the wake back to bed method. So with this, what you would normally do is you would set your alarm for about between 4 and 5 hours, more or less, after you first go to sleep. You would then get up and you would stay awake for an hour or two. Now, during this time, you might occupy yourself with some light reading, Sudoku, crossword, nothing massively engaging, or you might do some meditation. And for at least 15 or 20 minutes before you go back to sleep, you should set your intentions about what you want to do during the dream state. So if you've already slept for 5 hours, you've been up for say an hour and a half, you then go back to bed for another 3 hours. So you're going to sleep for a total of 8 hours, but during that last 3 hours, you will have more dreams than if you had just done an 8-hour block, because it's further along in the sleep cycle and you get more dreams the further into the sleep cycle that you go. Dream recall. The first thing to note about dream recall is if you drink a lot or if you smoke a lot of cannabis, that will affect your dream recall. If you're drinking and or smoking cannabis for 4 or more nights a week, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to establish a lucid dreaming practice. So if you are a big fan of drinking and smoking cannabis and you want to have a lucid dreaming practice, smoke less and drink less. It's not rocket science. The second thing to note about dream recall is vitamin B taken before you go to bed will help you remember your dreams. I read about this, I experimented with it, it definitely works for me. Take a multivitamin B or B6 in particular. So what you should do before you go to sleep, keep your pen and your dream journal close to your bed. When you wake up in the morning, before you do anything else, start writing down your dreams. Once you get to a point where you can't remember anything, go to the bathroom, take a piss, brush your teeth, whatever it is you do. When you come back, probably other things will have jogged your memory. Write down more if you can. And the final part of dream recall, I'd like to briefly mention some of the ideas in this book, Dreaming on Both Sides of the Brain by Doris E. Cohen. Now, I'm not going to go into any detail whatsoever about this. I'm just going to read you about what they are. If you want to know about it, buy the book. Simple as that. So Cohen has 7 steps of dream recall and exploration. 1. Recall and record your dream. 2. Give your dream a title. 3. Read or repeat your dream aloud slowly. 4. Consider what is uppermost in your life right now. 5. Describe your dream as if talking to a Martian. 6. Summarize the message from your unconscious. And 7. Consider your dream's guidance for waking life. Again, not always, but often your unconscious mind is trying to communicate with your conscious mind, and it does it through symbolism. So if you can recall your dreams, you've got a much better chance of being able to work on issues that affect you in your waking life. And if that's not a good enough reason for having a lucid dreaming practice, then I don't know what is. Now, finally, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about my first experiences when I started to have a lucid dreaming practice. I'm referring to my dream journal, the first dream journal I took, and this is from the 26th of August 2008, so over 12 years ago. Now, according to what I wrote down, I recorded a dozen dreams and I had one inner awareness dream sign, although I wrote in brackets, actually probably more. I had 19 action dream signs, 9 form dream signs, and 18 context dream signs. Now, if you don't know what those things are, you should watch my first video about this. So you will tend to find that you will have more of one type of dream sign than others. So the first thing was malfunctioning devices, primarily cars and bicycles. I drive a car and I'm a cyclist, so bikes and cars are both familiar to me. People unbothered by dangerous or odd actions. Meeting with celebrities or people from my past. Common form dream signs. Changing buildings. Mixed cities. Mixed countries. Men who become women. Women with beards, men with beards who then don't have beards, and strange animals and animal behaviour. And common context dream signs were mixed up film plots. I'd be in the plot of one film, but then it would be different than it originally is in the actual film. And also being in the house that I grew up in, but it would be mixed with the place that I worked in or with other places. So I wrote down target dream signs, malfunctioning devices, celebs and past acquaintances, mixed cities, mixed buildings and houses, mixed countries, strange animals and strange animal behaviour, and people with beards or not with beards. And when I say mixed cities and mixed countries, I mean one moment I'd be in a particular city that I'd lived in the past, such as Portsmouth. I would turn around a corner and I'd be in Bangkok. I lived in Bangkok in the past. So I set myself some dream goals and then I wrote a how and why. And in the how and why, I wrote down 1. To ask all celebrities I meet, how do we know each other? 2. To ask all past acquaintances, when did we first meet and what are you doing now? 3. To recognise mixed elements of cities and countries. 4. To ask myself, why are you at East Parade? East Parade was the street I grew up on as a child. And what are you doing here? 5. To notice people with beards, particularly women with beards and particularly people losing their beards. And 6. To properly examine all malfunctioning devices. So I gave myself a number of tasks and I wasn't massively specific about the way I did it, and I cast my net quite wide. Now, at the beginning, that kind of worked for me, and sometimes I would be in a dream and something would happen, and something would kind of make me remember that I'd set myself a task, and I would do something, and occasionally I would become lucid. More often, I would gain a slight level of lucidity, but I wouldn't become completely lucid. So essentially, what you're trying to do with these dream signs is think about things that keep occurring in your dreams and then look out for them and then try and use those things to gain lucidity. Now, exactly how you do this, you just need to experiment with it and write down what happens, because you'll try things that will work, you'll try things that don't work, and you'll try things that will nearly work and then you'll modify them. So a lot of it is just about exploration, trying different things, find out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. In the next video, I'll talk more about reality testing and what to try and do if you do become lucid, to keep lucidity. Because one of the things that I found when I first started my practice is that I would gain lucidity, but I would lose it very easily. So I'll talk about how to try and calm yourself in the dream state so that you don't lose lucidity. Thank you for watching. Peace.